Welcome back to State of Play. We've been digging into that secret meeting between House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. We want to bring in Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. He is a member of the Appropriations, Budget, and Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, welcome to State of Play.
Peter, it's great to be with you.
I appreciate your being here. We are seeing some criticism already from Republicans about this, from Democrats as well, for Jeffries meeting with Kushner. Kushner, obviously not a member of the administration. Is this something that we should have learned about from Leader Jeffries himself rather than through the media?
Well, first of all, it just shows Jared Kushner was incapable of getting an agreement with Iran and part of the crowd that got us into the senseless war in Iran. And now he decides he wants to talk to the Democratic leader in the House. Look, I never object to people having conversations. I do think it's important that if Leader Jeffries thinks something positive can come out of this, that he let us know what it is, because this administration has at every juncture essentially undermined our democracy and undermined our economy.
I guess I asked because Democratic voters, and I've been on the road in some of these key swing states, Michigan most recently, they keep saying they want fighters. It's all about, showing fight as opposed to partnering with the Republicans here. Does this effort go against that, or?
Well, I don't think talking by itself does, but this is why I think it's important that if there's anything that's going to supposedly come of this, that Leader Jeffries let people know, because this administration has at every juncture tried to undermine our democracy. They've lied to the American people repeatedly. Jared Kushner is, in bed economically with the Saudis. He's got billions of dollars of their investment in his firms. He's completely bungled all of our negotiations in the Middle East. So maybe he thinks he's going to do some kind of deal here in the United States, having failed overseas. And
yeah.
I don't mind people talking, of course, or listening, but let's not be delusional about what might come of this.
You were talking about some of the economic interests, the financial interests here. Let's talk about some of the personal ones for the Trump family. A new analysis released today, Senator Van Hollen, shows that since the end of last year, President Trump's oil and gas stocks portfolio has gained $15.5 million in the first 3 months of this year. The report also found that the president bought as much as $3.6 million in additional oil and gas stocks. What do you make of that? What concerns does that raise?
Well, clearly you've got a president who's profiting from the illegal war that he started along with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. I mean, the American people are hurting at the pump. Gas prices are, around $4 a gallon. And Donald Trump is profiting off of them. And this has been a pattern. We have the most corrupt White House in American history. He's essentially used the White House as a casino, a pay-to-play casino. And now he is grossly profiting off of a senseless war that's hurting Americans, has killed American soldiers. Donald Trump is pocketed over $1 billion just since he went back to the Oval Office.
We should note, just new this morning, the president is now threatening 50% tariffs on Canada. We had first been reporting on that for some specific items. Now he's proposing additional 50% tariffs on Canadian cars and steel that would go into place on January 1st. A reminder that these tariffs impact American consumers, not Canadians. What does this get for the U.S., sir?
Well, it doesn't get anything except for more economic pain, Peter. This is a president who, when asked about the affordability crisis, said the affordability crisis was a hoax. He also said he didn't think about the financial situation of the American people. That's pretty obvious, because these tariffs amount to taxes on the American people. And instead of raising new tariff taxes on the American people, the president should give back the approximately $2,000 in monies that the American households have spent from his first round of illegal tariffs, the ones that were struck down by the Supreme Court. This administration has been repaying big corporations, but they should be repaying American families to the tune of $2,000 a family.
Speaking of battlegrounds and elections, there are some grassroots Democrats excuse me, who have said that if Democrats take control of the House, perhaps the Senate as well, that they should impeach President Trump again. Do you believe that would be the right strategy?
Peter, I think our focus should be on these issues that are top of mind for the American people. And that means dealing with the affordability crisis, ending the senseless war in Iran. But it is important to hold this administration accountable for all its lies. For example, the fact that it still hasn't held accountable the DHS agents who gunned down American citizens in Minneapolis. They refuse to hold them accountable. Instead, they're going after Renee Good's partner. So we do need absolutely to hold this lawless Trump administration accountable. That's what we should be focused on, as well as these other important issues.
So just to be very clear, to put a point on it, would you support, do you think Democrats, because since you have to balance the two you've indicated, should Democrats impeach the president if they take control of the House again?
I think he's committed impeachable offenses. I think our focus should be on dealing with these big economic issues and taking other measures to hold members of this administration accountable. So, for example, Todd Blanche should never have been Attorney General. He's still acting like the president's personal attorney. He and folks under his control have lied to our courts, literally lied to our courts. They need to be held accountable.
Understood. So suffice to say, your view is that you don't have to impeach the president, but there are other ways to hold this administration accountable. Let me ask you about some of your own personal future opportunities, some of which you've been discussing. Just yesterday, you told Meet the Press that you're kicking the tires on a possible presidential run. Americans, by and large, are fed up with Washington right now. What gives you confidence, sir, and I know a decision's not made, that America could vote for a Washington lawmaker to be its next president?
Well, look, as I said, Peter, I'm listening to people. I'm kicking the tires. And I feel strongly that the Democratic Party needs to be clear about not only our opposition to Donald Trump. I mean, that should be 24/7 given this lawless administration. But we need to present a very clear vision for the future for working people. A lot of people think that, and some Democrats think it's okay just to go back to the pre-Trump status quo. That was completely broken. I mean, that delivered us a president who'd become a convicted felon. Understood. So my view, Peter, if you look at my record, it is one of taking on powerful special interests. And I think in many ways, the Democratic Party has become too cozy with some of those powerful special interests, and it needs shaking up.
Will we know by the end of this year which way you've decided?
Oh, I don't have any particular timeline on this right now. But as I said, I was pleased to have been invited to go up to New Hampshire to deliver some keynote addresses. Was asked to go out to the Iowa Steak Fry last year. And again, I'm listening to people on the ground. It's really important to get outside of the Washington bubble, because the Washington bubble has created many more problems than it's solved.
All right. Well, I'm told there's a new show on MS Now that airs at 11 a.m. weekdays. So if you have news you want to share, we'll be waiting for you. We appreciate it. Senator Chris Van Hollen, appreciate you making time.
All right, Peter. Good to be with you.